Hey gamers, and welcome back to the Barristers Backlog. It should come as no surprise that, like many others, I'm a huge fan of Akira Toriyama's most famous work, Dragon Ball. I've watched the anime, read the manga, collected the toys, and most importantly, played the games. While I could make an entire video dedicated to my love of the franchise and the merchandise I've accumulated over my many years as a fan, that isn't what I want to talk about today. Instead, we're going to look at two games based on the Dragon Ball franchise that I consider two of the worst games I have ever played. Dragon Ball Z collectible card game for the Game Boy Advance, and Dragon Ball Evolution the game for the PlayStation Portable. This is likely old news to anyone watching this video, but Dragon Ball and its central character Goku are cultural icons. Together with its creator Akira Toriyama, Dragon Ball has shaped the world of manga and anime several times over, and continues to do so nearly 40 years after its initial release. The popular anime was eventually brought over to the West and started airing on Cartoon Network's popular Toonami block back in 1998. The show would continue its run on Toonami and continue to grow in popularity throughout the early 2000s. During this time, Dragon Ball was near its peak of popularity in the US, and several companies were preparing to cash in, two of these being Score Entertainment and 20th Century Fox. Score Entertainment was a trading card design and manufacturing company based in Arlington, Texas. Like several other companies at the time, Score licensed popular intellectual properties for television programs, anime, and video games for their trading cards. Their first and likely most popular trading card game was released in the year 2000, a card game based on the Dragon Ball property, unsurprisingly called the Dragon Ball Z collectible card game. While never reaching the heights of Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic the Gathering, the Dragon Ball card game did eventually find success, and by 2006 had had several expansions and a growing competitive scene that is actually still active today, with a tournament happening in the upcoming September. In an effort to drum up support for the card game during its infancy, Score Entertainment, along with Imagine Engine and Screaming Games, began work on a Game Boy Advance title that was intended to be a virtual recreation of the Dragon Ball Z card game. This idea in theory made sense, as the Game Boy family of systems was no stranger to card battlers and had seen the release of games for the Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card games on the platform. With the hopes of reaching similar success, Dragon Ball Z collectible card game for the Game Boy Advance was released on May 29, 2002. I didn't purchase the game at its release, but I was heavily involved with the card game at the time. I played the card game, understood its mechanics, and actively collected the card, and still do to this day. However, even in the early 2000s, I never thought the Dragon Ball card game was necessarily fun to watch, overly exciting to play, or even easy to understand. The way matches were played, how games were won, and even the basic mechanics were somewhat complicated, and as this video is about a video game and not a physical card game, I won't take the time to explain it. You can, however, check out the video linked above for a better explanation. With that said, I was familiar with other card games like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! That had successfully made the leap onto the GBA, and after playing those games, was convinced, even as a youngster in 2002, that the Dragon Ball Z card game could never be adapted into a video game, and even if it was adapted, it would not be done successfully on the limited technology of the Game Boy Advance. All of this is to say that the Dragon Ball Z collectible card game video game was doomed from the outset. It failed to meet fan expectations, failed to really drum up support for the physical card game, and was honestly a complete failure as not only a virtual recreation of its inspiration, but also as a video game in general. In short, it was nothing more than a cash grab by Score to sell more cards and a pathetic attempt to capitalize on the Dragon Ball Z franchise as a whole. Let's talk about why. The Dragon Ball property has always been known for its interesting characters, engaging story, world building, and beautiful artwork. This GBA game craps on all of that.
That is one big pile of shit.
The representation of characters in the game, basically a PNG of a character's face, are pulled from either a still of the anime or from images extracted from the trading cards themselves, which are in turn stills from the anime that have been shrunken down and placed on a card. These images, originally beautiful artwork by Toriyama or another talented animator, are then shrunken down to fit the Game Boy Advance screen, leaving them as compressed and contorted ugly masses of pixels. While a fan of the series like myself will recognize these masses as familiar Dragon Ball Z characters, the characterization of these individuals, the cockiness of Frieza, the pride of Vegeta, or the childlike innocence of Goku, is completely gone. The game truly lacks any sort of soul and is more akin to a fan-made early 2000s Flash game than anything that should be officially licensed as a Dragon Ball product. The engaging story present in nearly every chapter of the original Dragon Ball Z manga, at least from the entrance of Raditz to the demise of Cell, is non-existent here. There is in fact no story content to be found in this game, as you simply move from battle to battle with little care as to who you are battling or why you are battling them. There are moments where the player, utilizing a deck based around Frieza, is tasked with defeating Frieza's very own henchman and member of the Ginyu Force, Guldo. Why does the player have to do this? Why would Frieza need to defeat his own henchman, who at this point in the story was already beheaded by Vegeta? I have no idea, and neither does the game or its developers. While I understand card battlers are not known for their engaging and thought-provoking plots, there were other card battlers available in the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance that had an interesting story to tell. Another aspect of Dragon Ball Z praised by fans is its music. Whether it's the original Japanese audio or the far superior Bruce Faulkner score, fans have always enjoyed the epic pieces of music that accompany every climactic fight in Dragon Ball Z. This game, instead of incorporating pieces to fit the theme of the battle occurring, opted to recycle the same 10 seconds of one Bruce Faulkner track over and over and over again. This not only gets incredibly tedious and annoying as you spend your time battling an opponent and hoping for the right card to magically appear in your hand, but it's also just disappointing.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
By the time the Cell Saga was broadcast here in the US, Faulkner had produced hours of music from the anime to use. Iconic tracks like Heroic Trunks, Gohan Fights Frieza, and Super Saiyan Gen Transformation all could have been used to set the mood for this game far better than an 8-second mind-numbing loop. The release and subsequent failure of the Dragon Ball Z card game video game, however, would not mark the end of corporations trying to cash in on the popularity of Goku and his fellow Z fighters. In fact, 2 months prior to the release of the GBA title in March of 2002, 20th Century Fox had acquired the rights to produce a live-action Dragon Ball movie that was sure to rake in the cash from American fans of the popular anime. What could go wrong?
I got a little surprise for you. 3, 2, 1.
Without the knowledge of the terrible video game and anime adaptations that were to come, fans honestly were more than excited for a big-budget Hollywood blockbuster featuring Goku, Krillin, Bulma, and the gang. A popular magazine at the time, Dragon Ball Z Beckett Collector, even featured reader polls and multi-page spreads devoted to the upcoming film that fueled the hype. As someone who was subscribed to the magazine at the time, I thankfully have these issues saved, which allows us to point and laugh hysterically at some of these terrible fan castings. It's important to note, however, that fans wanted to see the Cell Saga be brought to the big screen most of all. So most of these castings are from that era of Dragon Ball, but we do have some other iconic characters that show up here. First up is Elizabeth Hurley as Chi-Chi, who, that's fine. She was popular at the time for appearing in Austin Powers, but that's about all I know her for. Next up is Nicole Kidman as Bulma. I guess it's fine. I don't really think she could play the role that well. Then there is Leonardo DiCaprio as Trunks, which is interesting. After seeing, what he ended up doing later on in his career, it could work. Keanu Reeves as Gohan makes little to no sense. Even at the time of the Cell Saga, Gohan was still 10 to 12 years old, so I don't know how they would make that work when Keanu at the early 2000s was 20 at least, probably 25. So don't know what fans were thinking. Next up is Wesley Snipes or Vin Diesel as Piccolo. Vin Diesel, we're not even gonna talk about that. Wesley Snipes as Piccolo could be good at the time. He could have done it. Now he's obviously too old to play Piccolo, but back then that could have worked. Vin Diesel as Frieza is probably the worst fan casting here. I have no idea how Vin Diesel, who in my opinion can't act, was supposed to portray the cockiness and emotion that Frieza portrays against the Saiyans. Not sure how that was going to work at all. The Rock as Cell, okay, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of strange. It could work. Maybe they definitely have the round head shape going on, but I don't know, maybe. Dana Carvey as Master Roshi would have honestly been hilarious. He could have played that perfectly well. He is definitely turtly enough for the Turtle Club, so that could have worked out. Mini-Me or Danny DeVito as Krillin, both would be awesome. Danny DeVito, even at the time, was too old to play Krillin, but it could have worked. It could work. Jet Li as Vegeta, yes, absolutely. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. Jet Li absolutely could be Vegeta. Robin Shao as Goku is awesome, especially for a 90s kid like myself. Robin was the protagonist of the Mortal Kombat movies back in the day, and he would have been awesome as Goku. Cameron Diaz as Android 18, yeah, that makes sense. That tracks. They even kind of look similar. So that's all we've got for these fan castings. Let me know what you guys think in the comments about these and who you would have cast in your dream movie in the Dragon Ball universe. Go crazy. Let's hear about it. Now that we're done pointing and laughing at the early 2000s, it's important to note that those polls were completed and those fan castings published in the October 2002 issue of Dragon Ball Z Beckett Collector. Unfortunately for fans, the upcoming Dragon Ball film would not release for another 7 years. When finally, on April 10, 2009, fans would finally sit down to watch Dragon Ball Evolution, and they were less than thrilled. The film was immediately lambasted due to its failure to follow the story of the original manga and anime, and is now considered not only one of the worst movies of all time, but one of the worst live-action anime adaptations of all time. With a current 14% critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes and a 19% audience score, to say the film was poorly received would be a massive understatement. There are, however, several videos on YouTube chronicling the failures of this film, and that's not what this video is about. Instead, we're here to discuss its far lesser known tie-in fighting game released for the PlayStation Portable, originally titled Dragon Ball Evolution: The Game. Developed by Dimps, the same creatives behind several successful Dragon Ball games, such as the first two Budokai titles, Dragon Ball Advanced Adventure on the GBA, and even the Shin Budokai series, also released on the PlayStation Portable, Dragon Ball Evolution, the game, is at least better than the film it is based on, though that isn't saying much. The game still spectacularly fails at capturing the magic of the Dragon Ball franchise, falling short in both execution and engagement. Much like its film inspiration, the game attempts to capitalize on one of Japan's most beloved franchises, but ultimately disappoints even the most ardent of fans and goes down as another monument to missed opportunity and corporate greed. Instead of using the years of rich lore and intricate storylines available thanks to its source material, Dragon Ball Evolution, the game, follows in the footsteps of the film and opts for a generic good versus evil narrative devoid of any depth or originality. The player mostly controls Goku, who looks more like a rejected high school-age Street Fighter character than a Saiyan warrior, as he battles various mainstays of the Dragon Ball universe, whether friend or foe, to gather the 7 Dragon Balls and stop King Piccolo from taking over the world. While this is somewhat of an arc in the original Dragon Ball manga and anime, it is the changes made to Goku and Piccolo's origin story and the characterization of pivotal franchise staple characters that curtails the generic plot into absurdity. Fortunately for the game and this video, this train wreck of a plot is the fault of the film writers of Dragon Ball Evolution and doesn't deserve much more consideration here, as this is not a review of the film. How the ridiculous narrative of the film is conveyed to the player during the game, however, does deserve attention. Through compressed still character images pulled from the movie plastered in front of an ugly color-smeared background that looked like it was drawn in MS Paint, boring tech boxes full of cringe-inducing dialogue that would feel more at home in an episode of Riverdale, abhorrent repetitive music, and the occasional mess of rendered cutscene that sees misshapen pixelated masses throwing punches and kicks at one another. It all comes together to deliver the already terrible plot of the film in the worst way imaginable. The visuals during the actual fighting gameplay of Dragon Ball Evolution, the game, don't fare much better either. Gone are the vibrant colors and dynamic, recognizable aesthetic of Dragon Ball, and in its place stands muted, jagged character models that would look more at home on the set of a low-budget Power Rangers fan film or a bad PlayStation 1 game. Environments are also bland, repetitive, and look like they were ripped from a budget stock photo website. This disconnect between the Dragon Ball created by Akira Toriyama, the characters and locations fans know and love, and what was delivered on both the screen and in this game is truly baffling and shows how little Hollywood understood anime culture back in the early 2000s. With a development team known for making decent Dragon Ball titles on the PSP, like the Shin Budokai and Shin Budokai Another Road games, it is amazing how terrible the combat in Dragon Ball Evolution truly is. Compared to the explosive energy of the source material or even Dimps' other Dragon Ball titles, the fighting system on display here is a limp noodle, and the AI is dumb as a rock. In short, the fighting system relies heavily on button mashing, lacking any strategic depth or satisfying execution that defines a successful fighting game. Honestly, due to the game's brain-dead AI, Mashing the same attack repeatedly is enough to get through most encounters in the story mode, and opponents in arcade mode don't fare much better. Special attacks like the Kamehameha, supposed to be explosive displays of power, are underwhelming whimpers that feel inconsequential due to the overall mechanical simplicity of the game, and are rarely even needed to win a match. Mash buttons, watch flashy but meaningless animations, repeat. Ultimately, both of these Dragon Ball titles failed to deliver anything close to a satisfying experience for fans of the franchise or video games in general. They lacked the depth, polish, and engaging elements that define a successful game, and the explosive energy and aesthetic that is required for a good Dragon Ball game. While either of these titles may hold some modicum of potential for a die-hard fan of the Dragon Ball franchise like myself with a morbid curiosity to see the worst Dragon Ball tie-in games have to offer, they are otherwise lifeless cash grabs and missed opportunities to offer fans an engaging gaming experience. In the vast pantheon of Dragon Ball games, these two sit comfortably at the bottom gathering dust. If you take away anything from this video, let it be this. Play any other Dragon Ball title than Dragon Ball Z collectible card game on the Game Boy Advance and Dragon Ball Evolution, the game, on the PlayStation Portable. That's all for this video, gamers. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the Barristers Backlog for more content like this, and let me know in the comments whether you played these games, and if so, what you thought about them. And don't forget, let me know about your weird fan castings for your dream Dragon Ball movie. As always, keep gaming.